Imagine, it's 1953 and you are an officer working in the Manila City Jail in the Philippines. A young woman who was recently incarcerated seems to be ordinary until the night falls and she begins screaming. Picture the shock on the faces of the police officers, the mayor, and medical professionals when vicious bite marks began appearing all over the helpless woman's body. Yet no one can see just who or what is biting and strangling her. They could only watch in horror. Though far beyond the pale, dozens witnessed these anomalous bite marks as they were pressed into her skin, leaving deep teeth marks wet with what appeared to be saliva. To make matters worse, the attacks continued for over 2 weeks, while Clarita Villanueva was held in jail before the eyes of many witnesses. This is the case of Clarita Villanueva's invisible tormentors. When researching this event, I found that discrepancies and distortions between sources were pretty stark. Given that this event happened in 1953, this meant that reliable sources were more scarce, as were proper translations of original sources into English. So, going forward, I will try to note when sources differ. However, the main series of events are not in question. All of the initially available information on this case came from 2 major press releases that hit newspapers worldwide on May 19th and 20th of the same year. One of the other main sources for some of this information is a book published by Pastor Lewis Sumrall, where heavy religious bias has to be taken into account. It's evident when you read the book. However, there are many elements of Sumrall's account which I was able to verify independently with other sources. Sumrall also includes alleged English translations of local newspapers which covered the early story as it unfolded, as opposed to the international press. Some have been skeptical of whether or not Sumrall was even involved in the case at all, or if he just wrote himself into the story for his own gain. However, after doing some extensive research, I've found independent sources that validate Sumrall's involvement, as well as photographs of Sumrall and his wife with Clarita. Before we can truly begin to understand what happened in the Manila City Jail, we must first understand who Clarita was. Our witness, Clarita Villanueva, was born in 1935. She had 2 brothers, who she says she had very little contact or connection with. She reportedly never knew her father, as it seems he either left the family or passed away when she was very young. Growing up, Clarita always wondered about her father and his whereabouts. According to some sources, her mother was a spiritist who made a living as a fortune teller. Spiritism is a philosophical and religious movement based around the idea of another layer of reality, the spirit dimension, coexisting with our material world. They believed that certain people possessed the ability to contact, commune, and interface with this dimension and its inhabitants. According to the sources that I've read, there are generally 5 basic tenets of Spiritism: the existence of God, the immortality of the soul, plurality of existences, reincarnation, plurality of the inhabited planets, and communicability with the spirit realm. Shortly after World War II, Clarita's mother passed away, leaving her orphaned and impoverished. According to some sources, she worked as a maid and then a taxi dancer, a kind of paid dance partner, or turned to prostitution at a terribly young age, just to survive. In 1951, Clarita moved to Manila, having nothing left for her in her hometown. According to some sources, she went to search for her father. The events of May 6, 1953 are shrouded in hearsay and bickering sources. However, most all agree that on May 6th, Clarita Villanueva was committed to the city jail in Manila on charges of vagrancy. As described by the Philippines Free Press, May 30th, per Sumrall's book, Clarita quote, saw a late movie, she said, and on her way home, she was picked up by police and booked on suspicion of vagrancy. She was committed to the city jail on May 6th. The first few days and nights in the women's detention building were uneventful, unquote. Other sources say that Clarita allegedly unknowingly offered unlawful services to a plainclothes police officer, which soon led to her stay in the Manila City Jail. This prison was used for hundreds of years in the past. It was originally built by the Spanish, but was later used by the Americans and the Japanese. During World War II, the prison was captured by the Japanese and used to hold prisoners of war. Within the cold walls of the women's detention building of the Manila City Jail, Clarita would soon encounter her invisible tormentors. According to most sources, the first days and nights of Clarita's jail time were uneventful. This all changed on the night of May 9th into the morning of May 10th, when Clarita encountered the entity she would call the Thing. According to the newspaper, quote, then, on Saturday, May 9th, something unusual happened. Without her knowing it, she said, her right leg got wedged in her wooden bed. She said it was only with great difficulty that she was able to finally extricate her leg. She said she did not attach any special significance to the incident, but after a while, she noticed that small pebbles were being thrown into her cell. Her cellmates also noticed the stones. Clarita and her companions thought that perhaps someone was only having a little fun. Then, bigger stones came pelting into their cell. The women began scolding their unknown tormentor. They raised so much noise that the guard came around and ordered them to bed, unquote. This may sound like an odd detail, but this sort of phenomena has been documented for years in psychical research. Apports are objects which are materialized or transported by unknown means. This phenomenon is mostly associated with seances and mediums, but also appears in cases of possession, poltergeists, and other psychic phenomena. I've discussed a case on this channel previously where rocks materialized seemingly from nowhere during a case of supposed paranormal phenomena documented in the archives of the CIA. The account continues. She related that it was while she was sitting on her bed, preparing to go to sleep, that she first saw the Thing, the big one, perched on a beam overhead. Just to clarify, during the first attack, Clarita initially only saw one of the two entities, which she would later refer to as the Thing. Quote, Clarita said that the Thing made a move to jump on her, and she froze with fright. The Thing, she said, actually jumped on her and sat on top of her. Then the big one, which she described as big, black, and covered with curly black hair, started biting her. Because of her fright at the sight of the supposed monster, she did not immediately notice the presence of the small one, which she described as small, spindle-legged, and with a beard on its round face. She said that the small one helped the big one in biting her. According to Clarita, she thought that the cell guard, as well as the other detention prisoners, did not believe her when she told them what happened, but when her screaming was brought to the attention of Captain Ganibi, the prison officer, he ordered them to pray before the improvised altar in one of the cells. Clarita complained to the prison officer that she could not see the altar as the big one was obstructing her view. She told us later that Captain Ganibi even slapped her because she insisted on turning her head away from the altar. Sunday night, May 10th, was the most horrible night she had spent so far because of the almost continuous attacks of both the big one and the small one. Clarita kept screaming, and Captain Ganibi was fetched from his home to handle the situation. Ganibi had the girl taken to his office and had her surrounded by a human ring composed of jail guards and other persons. but the attacks continued, and she showed them fresh bites on her arms and on her neck. Genibi decided that the thing was a matter for higher authorities. That was how the phenomenon came to public notice. Clarita was bitten multiple times by the thing before the eyes of her cellmates. At some point during this attack, Dr. Angelo Singian was brought in to observe her, and he too witnessed the anomalous wounds appearing on Clarita's body as no one was touching her. According to medical professionals, Clarita's attacks were followed by an unconscious spell. Afterwards, she was found to be entirely lucid, sane, and in full possession of her mental faculties. Yet she was adamant that she was being bitten and strangled by bizarre entities that only she could see. Word soon spread about Clarita's mysterious situation, and it was not long before the local press picked up the story, with reporters stating that Clarita's bites were supernatural in origin. On May 11th, Dr. Mariano B. Lara, a professor and department head of pathology and professional lecturer of legal medicine for the University of Santo Tomas, with 38 years of medical practice, witnessed this phenomenon. As the chief medical examiner for the Manila Police Department, he was, according to every source, a key figure in the investigation of this case. He later wrote a report about his experience with this case. This report is also very important as it independently confirms the involvement of Lewis Sumrall, a point which has been in contention among discussions of this case on the internet. Quote, "My first notice of Clarita Villanueva, a Bilibid prison cell inmate whose recent experience during her confinement in jail has attracted worldwide attention, especially from the United States, Australia, and Japan, was in the 11th of May. The metropolitan newspapers in the city of Manila published a news item about her being a victim of bodily bites by an unseen power. The news story reported that Dr. Angelo Singian, my first assistant in the medical examiner's office of the Manila City Police Department, had been called to observe the phenomenon during the night of May the 10th. The reporters made the statement to the effect that the bodily bites were of supernatural origin. On May 11th, upon arriving at my office at the city morgue, I was met by Dr. Abelardo Lucero, my second assistant in the same office, who reported to me orally that he, together with his brother, Lieutenant Colonel Cesar Lucero, Chief of Police of the Manila Police Department, had, earlier in the morning of this day, gone to the cell to see Clarita Villanueva to make a routine checkup on the biting phenomenon. Dr. Lucero reported that he had seen human teeth-like impressions on both arms of the girl, but that he believed that these impressions were likely the effects of her own biting. He further mentioned that he believed the girl, Clarita Villanueva, to be abnormal. I paid no special attention to this foregoing report by two assistants, considering it a matter of little or no consequence. I did not care to make any opinion about it, as I had not seen the phenomenon, and my years of training as a doctor are only scientific. I find it difficult and near impossible to accept anything of a supernatural character." Unquote. However, that night, according to the Daily Mirror, Clarita claimed she was bitten 20 times. According to the newspaper, quote, "Clarita talked and answered questions weakly, but sensibly, before a crowd of observers. Suddenly, her facial expressions would change to anguish and horror, as if she were confronted with the thing. She would look around wildly, and then scream as if she were trying to shake off the thing. Then her strenuous resistance would cease, and she would collapse into the arms of those holding her, weak and half-conscious. After regaining her senses, she said that one of the devils was big and dark, with curly hair on his chest, head, and arms. He has large, sharp eyes and 2 fangs. His voice is a deep, echoing sound. He is shrouded in black." Father Vargas, the prison chaplain, was summoned at 2:30 a.m., and he agreed to come only as an observer. Clarita was bitten for the last time on the right knee. That was the first time on the lower part of her anatomy. Other bite marks appeared on her neck, arms, and shoulders. Observers insist that they are within sight all the time." Unquote. Dr. Lara's account continues on May 12th. Quote, "On the following morning, May 12th, when I arrived at my office, Clarita had been called from her cell and examined by Dr. Lucero in his office. I walked inside. I casually paid notice to her. I did not know who she was until my assistant told me that this is the girl who is the victim of the biting phenomenon. I looked at her superficially and noticed the existence of reddish, human-like bite impressions present on the anterior surface of both arms. As I scrutinized these impressions, I agreed provisionally to the opinion of Dr. Lucero that they could have been produced by her own teeth. I left the matter entirely to Dr. Lucero for the proper disposition of the girl. He recommended hospitalization and the National Psychopathic Hospital in order to prevent Manila Police Department from being scandalized as a party of believers in fakery, and also to prevent the jail from being deluged with curious people wishing to see her. I allowed Dr. Lucero to enforce his wishes. As a matter of fact, I signed the regular form of recommendation for insanity investigation and transference to the psychopathic hospital, labeling Clarita as an epileptic or one given to depressive attacks. I thought the girl was transferred that afternoon, but found out later that she was not dispatched as planned." Unquote. Dr. Lara would soon change his mind about Clarita and the strange biting phenomenon haunting her. Dr. Lara's account continues. Quote, "On May 13th, I again arrived at my office as usual, not remembering this Clarita. Towards midday, visitors came to the office, including my friend, Mr. Laperal, in charge of the Property and Supply section of the Manila Police Department. All of them inquiring about my opinion of the biting phenomenon, allegedly victimizing the girl. I told these people that as far as I'm concerned, I have no opinion about this matter, as I had no opportunity to observe her in spite of all the sorts of news items appearing in the newspaper with contradictory opinions given by my medical assistants. My friend, Mr. Laperal, invited me to see the girl in the cell and find out whether it were true or not that she was being bitten by something that is invisible. Therefore, Mr. Laperal, my medical assistant Dr. Lucero, my dentist Dr. Gonzalez, and myself proceeded to the female cell where she was being confined. We found her there, lying on the lower part of a wooded double-deck bunk. Sitting beside her was another female cell inmate, Mrs. Manuel. I talked to Clarita and inquired whether she is the girl described as suffering from the bites as told by the newspaper reporters, and she answered affirmatively in her native tongue. She was nervous and childish, comparable with her age and lack of educational training, but was polite. I asked her if we could see the bites that we had heard about. Clarita informed us that we should return sometime past midday, about 2 o'clock, when the thing causing the bites would come again. I told her that if I became convinced of someone else biting her, I would try my best to bring her to the Philippines International Fair for exhibition. Clarita smilingly took the joke with the comment that she would be happy for that, as she would no doubt make plenty of money. However, I could not wait for the bites to appear, so I left about 5 minutes to 12 on May 13th. In the afternoon of the same day, about 2:15, I returned to my office where a group of 30 medical interns who are studying under me, finishing their doctorate degree from the University of Santo Tomas. They were already gathered for their class. Immediately, I asked my orderlies if Clarita had any bites during the interval while I was away. My orderlies informed me that Clarita had been transferred since midday to the San Lazaro Hospital for confinement and treatment by my other assistant, Dr. David Cabrera. I called for Dr. Cabrera and inquired whether or not he had sent Clarita to the hospital as reported, and he answered affirmatively, explaining that Clarita had a fever at the time. I explained to him that I had an appointment with Clarita at about 2 o'clock, at which time she promised to be bitten again. Therefore, I requested him to have the girl returned from San Lazaro Hospital. This was promptly done, and in a few minutes, Clarita was brought by ambulance to the office of the medical examiner, Manila Police Department. At the time Clarita arrived, she was unconscious and was carried into my observation room, seated on a chair. She was placed in front of the class of interns and myself. The body of Clarita was soft and entirely insensitive to all stimuli. Her arms, lifted by me, would fall without resistance. Pointed needles and pens touching her skin gave no response throughout her body surface. After several minutes in this condition, Clarita began to come out of this state of insensibility and trance. Meanwhile, I was like Sherlock Holmes of the detective stories. Equipped with magnifying lens and with an unbelieving mind about this biting phenomenon, I scrutinized carefully the exposed parts of her body, the arms, hands, and neck, to find out whether they had the biting impressions. I saw the reddish, human-like bite marks on the arms. She was still soft in the entire body and could not stand up by herself. One of my assistants, a cadaver technician, Alfonso by name, helped carry her to a bed for her to rest on during the state of partial trance. Alfonso got hold of her body and deposited her on the prepared bed, placing both her hands over her in order that they would not hang downward. At that very instant, this girl, in a semi-trance, loudly screamed, repeatedly, a scream of pain, in Tagalog, and when I removed Alfonso's hand from Clarita's, I saw, with my unbelieving eyes, the clear marks or impressions of human-like teeth from both the upper and lower jaws. It was a little moist in the area bitten on the dorsal aspect of the left hand, and the teeth impressions were mostly from the form of the front or incisor teeth. Seeing these with my unbelieving eyes, yet I could not understand nor explain how they were produced, as her hand had all the time been held away from the reach of her mouth, and that place where the bite impressions occurred, on the dorsal on the left hand, was the very place held by my assistant, Alfonso. I knew she could not bite herself, nor could Alfonso, who does not possess a single tooth, having recently had them extracted by a dentist. I am also sure that I did not bite the girl, causing the impressions to appear on her hand. Not finding any possible explanation insofar as my human experience and medical training is concerned, I kept my mouth shut, but not my mind. Clarita kept on screaming for about 15 minutes with this bite on her left hand, and she turned bluish in the face and legs, as if being choked. There were also a few reddish whelps in the front of the neck occurring with this phenomenon. After about 20 minutes of the attack, accompanied by stiffness and screaming, her body became soft and in a trance-like condition, which was a repetition of the observation made when she was first brought into the room. After about 10 minutes of this trance and softness of her entire body, she gradually recovered consciousness and shortly thereafter became normal again. In this normal condition, she sat on a chair and the group of interns talked with her. She answered all the questions that were compounded to her sanely and intelligently, in which she recounted a story something to the effect as follows: that she was born in Bacolod City, that she had several brothers, but that she is not interested in them as they had been unkind to her, that her parents died several years ago. In full possession of her normal mind, I asked her who is causing her to suffer from bites. She answered that there are two who are alternately biting her. One big, black, hairy human-like fellow, very tall with 2 sharp eyes, 2 sharp canine teeth, a long beard, hairy extremities and chest, wearing a black garment with a little whitish piece on the back resembling a hood. His feet are also 3 times the size of normal feet. The other fellow is a very small one, about 2 or 3 feet tall, allegedly also black, hairy, and ugly." Unquote. Dr. Lara later described Clarita's anomalous condition in his written report. Quote, "There had been factually seen and observed instantaneous appearance of human teeth-like bite impression marks on the various parts of her upper extremities, together with choking effects, with asphyxial manifestations associated with invisibly caused but visible manual-like strangling marks upon her neck during outbursts of screaming as from fear and pain, followed by unconsciousness and body flaccidity and complete insensibility, all lasting for about 1 hour, and then a return to normalcy with a very clear, lucid, sane, and sensible mind, during which period of normalcy or lucidity she firmly and consistently maintained that she had been bitten and strangled by 2, one big, another small, black, hairy fellows." The Manila Times also later reported on this incident. According to the Manila Times, May 14th, quote, "Later in the night, cellmates of the girl said that she had gone into a violent tantrum when they refused to give her water. They said Villanueva then grabbed an aluminum cup, standing bottom up on a window, and drank from it. She drank from an empty cup. Shortly before 4 p.m., one of the doctors said that Alfonso Aquino, a morgue helper, was holding her arms as the others looked on. Suddenly, she looked to the left of her, and then at the ceiling, and started beating her arms. As she revived from a faint, she muttered to Aquino, 'It is under your hand.' Aquino then removed his hand, and on the back of Villanueva's hand, the doctor said, were teeth marks that were still moist with saliva and sinking into the skin. One of the male students was able to take a picture of the bite immediately after the attack. He had placed the camera in powerful focus to better take the teeth implants." Unquote. Unfortunately, I can find no trace of this photo. By May 18th, the mayor of Manila, Arsenio Lacson, had read of Clarita's bizarre situation in local newspapers. He was skeptical, thinking that this was all being blown out of proportion by the news media, but he wanted to see it for himself. Mayor Lacson ordered Clarita to be brought to his office, where he, Dr. Lara, and others could evaluate her further. This meeting would result in another high strangeness incident, which would reach international press, with headlines like, "Evil spirits attack a girl, even when mayor near." After only 15 minutes, Clarita saw the beings again, and was reportedly attacked in front of everyone. She suffered 2 attacks, and was bitten on the neck and the index finger. The witnesses, including Dr. Lara, Mayor Lacson, and other medical professionals, and multiple journalists, were adamant that the bites were not caused by Clarita or any other human being in the room. Astonished, Mayor Lacson was quoted by various newspapers. "Clarita's hand was bitten while I was holding it. The finger was bitten under my palm. What it is beyond me. This is something that goes way back to the dark, dim past." Unquote. Clarita was asked to draw a picture of the things, and she agreed to do so. She was given a pencil and paper, but before she could begin drawing, the pencil flew out of her hand. After the ontologically shaking experience, the mayor decided to ask the archbishop to perform an exorcism. On the 18th, it was reported in international newspapers that the mayor was publicly calling for the help of an exorcist. International newspapers did not cover the rest of the story, though local newspapers, reportedly clipped and reproduced in Sumrall's book, did. This announcement drew even more people out to see Clarita. Numerous priests, shamans, mediums, and occult experts came to speak with her, to study the case, and to try to help her with this otherworldly issue. According to United Press, the following day, before a crowd of, quote, about 100 medical specialists, nurses, and pressmen, unquote, Clarita was observed going in and out of trance-like states of consciousness, tensing up, screaming, and collapsing. Some of the journalists present recorded the meeting for local radio stations. She was evaluated by 2 doctors from a state-funded hospital, the National Center for Mental Health, Dr. Zaguire and Dr. Goducho. The 2 of them examined Clarita, determined to find an explanation. They interviewed Clarita, who described the beings to them. She reportedly told the doctors that the large hairy creature tells her to do things. Quote, "I see him often, morning, noon, and night." Unquote. Dr. Zaguire reportedly noticed one of the bites on the nape of her neck, but dismissed it. After their rather brief examination for what has been established as a clearly complex issue, Clarita was dismissed as suffering from a hysterical fugue, and that her own mind was imprinting the teeth marks onto her skin somehow. This is where Pastor Louis Sumrall enters the story. Sumrall wrote that he first learned of Clarita's case by hearing a recording of a 45-minute-long interview with Clarita on the radio. The interview was, quote, "one of the most blood-curdling programs I have ever heard," unquote. The following morning, he went to see Clarita for himself, hoping that he can perform an exorcism and help the girl. On the morning of May 21st, Sumrall made contact with the authorities and explained his intent with helping Clarita. Sumrall first met with Dr. Lara, who explained the situation with Clarita. After Lara decided that perhaps Sumrall could help, he arranged for their meeting. Quote, "As the girl entered the door, she observed each person slowly and closely. I suppose she was looking for the doctors who urged her to have the devils bite her again and again. When she came to me at the end of the line, her eyes widened and she glared at me saying, 'I don't like you.' These were the first words the devil spoke through her lips to me. They used her lips constantly to curse me. She did this in English, and yet after she was delivered, I had to converse with her through an interpreter as she could not speak English." Unquote. As Sumrall began his attempt to exorcise Clarita, she seemed to go in and out of trance-like state of consciousness. On the same morning, a group of journalists from the Philippines Free Press were on their way to visit Clarita when they heard an ear-piercing scream and realized that the entities must have struck again. According to the Philippines Free Press, quote, "We went with all possible haste to the cell occupied by Clarita, but before we reached it, the screams had stopped. In the cell, we found Clarita seated on a wooden bed with tears still flowing down her cheeks. An American civilian, who we later learned was Reverend Lester Sumrall, a Protestant minister, was kneeling on the cement floor before the stricken girl. He was holding both of Clarita's hands by the wrists. He was praying. Manila Police Department's Chief Medico-Legal Officer, Dr. Mariano B. Lara, was standing to one side, wiping tears away from his own eyes. Prison Officer Captain Antonio Ganibi stood speechless behind Dr. Lara. Holding Clarita by the arm was Mrs. Domingo Reyes, a professor of psychology and philosophy in a local university. There were a few other people in the cell, but just then we were too occupied by the engrossing scene to notice them. We could see immediately that the other people in the cell besides Clarita had gone through an experience they could not easily forget. They looked wild-eyed. Dr. Lara, who has become accustomed to opening cadavers in the Manila Police Department morgue without batting an eyelash, was shaky. He held the left arm of Clarita and pointed out to us the fresh bite on it. As accusing us of disbelief, he asked in a quivering voice, "Don't you believe that?" We drew closer and took a hard look at the bite. The sight sent a cold shiver down our spine. It did not in any way resemble a human bite. In the first place, it was too large for human teeth. In the second place, the bite was completely round. Anybody may find out for himself by actual tests on his own arm that a human bite is elliptical. And finally, we were awed to discover that all the teeth marks appeared to have been made by molars. Clarita seemed exhausted, and so was Reverend Sumrall. He was visibly shaken, and his hands trembled. It would seem that the thing won the first round." Unquote. The following day, Sumrall returned to try and exorcise Clarita once again. Sumrall arrived and began the exorcism. Early the following morning, we returned to find out more about the thing. Reverend Sumrall had 2 other Protestant ministers with him when he showed up at 9 o'clock. Before going into the cell of Clarita, he pleaded with the people around to keep us away, as exorcising the evil spirits was not a show. Only Dr. Lara went into the cell with the ministers. After a while, we also decided to sneak in. Reverend Sumrall knelt before the girl and took her hands into his. He asked her if she knew him, and she said she did. But after a moment, while the minister was invoking the Lord to liberate this little creature from the devil, Clarita's countenance changed. She became wild-eyed and screamed at the minister before her, telling him to go away. After some time, with Sumrall and everyone else demanding the beings leave her alone, Clarita seemed to go back to normal. She told the interpreter that the beings had fled out the window. However, only moments later, Clarita suffered another attack. Quote, "I cried to them, 'Why have you returned? You know you must go and not return.' Speaking in English through her lips, they replied, 'But she is unclean, and we have a right to live with her.'" Unquote. They demanded the beings to leave, and they seemed to leave Clarita alone. However, as Sumrall was preparing to leave, the beings struck again. Quote, "This time I was very upset, and the unconverted newspaperman could not understand what was happening. I questioned the demons why they had returned, and they spoke in English through her lips. But she has not asked us to go. She wants us. It is only you who desires us to leave." Again, we demanded that they leave her. Again, they immediately left. She once more said they had gone through the window. I explained to her now why they returned, and demanded her to tell them to leave and not return. This she did. It was now about noon again. Clarita was weak from the ordeal. I told them to give her rest, and after that, food." Unquote. Later that day, Reverend Sumrall spoke to Clarita one last time. Quote, "As I was leaving, I told Clarita that I was sure these devils would return. 'After I am gone,' I said, 'they will come. Then you must demand them to leave without my being present.'" Unquote. The same evening, at 8 o'clock, Clarita was once again attacked by the very same entities who were supposed to be exorcised. Before the eyes of another guard, Clarita was attacked yet again by an invisible force which was clearly dragging Clarita around the room as she struggled against it. Clarita let out a blood-curdling scream. "Help, they're back to get me. They're standing behind you." The scared guard jumped up to his desk to try to escape from the devils, and he watched what he called the greatest struggle he had ever seen. He could not see the aggressors, but he could see the girl in mortal combat. Unquote. Clarita demanded that the entities leave her alone, and then, quote, "she lurched forward and grabbed with her hands, which seemed to have been instantly freed. She went into a coma. The prison authorities who were in the compound and many prisoners had gathered. They laid her on a table, but her hands would not open. The doctor pried her hands open, and to his uttermost astonishment, there was some long, black, coarse hair. It was in the palm of her hand and under the fingernails. Dr. Lara placed this hair in an envelope and put it in a guarded place. Under the microscope, Dr. Lara found that the hair was not from the head nor from any part of the human body. I personally saw this hair under the magnifying glass. It was about 2 inches long, coarse, had no root, and showed no signs of being cut. The doctor has no answer to this mystery, how an invisible being presumably a devil, could have lost hair from his chest by a visible being pulling it out is one of the strangest facts of history. This phenomenon we must leave unanswered at the present. Dr. Lara also attests to this final encounter. Quote, "As a result of this apparent deliverance of the girl during the early night of May 22, 1953, after a time during the afternoon, she then manifested one act wherein she physically struggled with the body visibly dragged with or against an invisible adversary and in the presence of the police guard, during which act she screamed and shouted in fear and crying, her hands clenched, and in trembling there were found many, about 40, coarse black hairs, not one being long, but all of them measuring about 1.5 inches long, tucked under the fingernails and held against the palms by her fingertips, which hairs are to this date kept as evidence of this weird phenomenon occurring during our lifetime, for anyone now and in the future interested to verify and to study." Unquote. On May 26th, Clarita was released from jail, acquitted of her charges. In follow-up interviews years later, Clarita was found to be well-adjusted emotionally, intelligent, and sane. She reported no further attacks from the beings or any other paranormal phenomena. So what exactly happened during this case? Of course, many skeptics would side with the two doctors from the National Center for Mental Health who dismissed Clarita as merely suffering from extreme hysteria and a novel form of fugue state unbeknownst to science. However, any skeptical explanation would have to account for the facts established by the case. If we look at Dr. Mariano Lara's report, one would have to explain bizarre events which he attests to. Quote, "The 13th, 14th, 15th, 18th, 19th, 21st, and 22nd of May 1953, the undersigned, having been officially prodded to investigate the matter, largely from the medical point of view, and in the presence of many other observers, professors of psychology and philosophy and education in the University of the Philippines and of the Far Eastern University, as well as other officials of the city government of Manila and the Bilibid compound, medical doctors, and interns, there had been factually seen and observed instantaneous appearance of human teeth-like bite impression marks upon the various parts of her upper extremities. This case was labeled by some as a case of demonic possession, mostly by more religious sources. Ufologists and paranormal researchers categorize Clarita's horrifying experience as some sort of entity encounter, possibly an interdimensional being, or what John Keel called ultra-terrestrials. Some researchers even labeled this as a vampire attack, for lack of a better term. This case leaves us with many questions. Why could Clarita see the beings and no one else? Could Clarita have been what we would call a psychic? Her mother was said to be a fortune teller. Could Clarita have been a psychic herself if her mother truly had any such talents? Whatever became of the hair sample reportedly taken from the entity, I can find no follow-up information about the hair at all, other than it was reportedly stored in a safe location known to Dr. Lara as proof that this bizarre event happened. Dr. Lara's entire worldview was shifted by this case, which in my opinion makes it all the more credible. He was quoted by some newspapers as saying, "I always thought of this world as a visible thing, but here is something unknown, a force unseen, yet felt." Unquote. The Philippines Free Press quoted a longtime employee of the Manila City Jail who had an interesting perspective on this phenomenon. The entities, which Clarita referred to collectively as the Thing. Quote, "It is like the wind. The wind cannot be seen, but it can inflict physical damage. The Thing may be likened to the wind. The Thing also cannot be seen. Like the wind, it also can cause physical damage. The wind is real. How about the Thing?" Unquote. This high strangeness case, and many others like it, challenge us to question what we believe about our reality.